West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, you know, nobody has done more for Christianity, nobody has done more for religion of all types than me. Those insane words are not mine. That is the latest burst of verbal dementia from Donald Trump in an interview today with the Christian Broadcasting Network. Now, I have known since my Catholic school days that is blasphemy. And the 6 Catholics on the Supreme Court know that's blasphemy. Donald Trump thinks he has done more for Christianity than Jesus Christ. Donald Trump is uneducated in all things, and so he does not know who Christianity is named after. And so it is ironic, to put it mildly, that 3 of the Supreme Court justices appointed by the only blasphemous president in history are leaning heavily on their religion as they willfully, for the first time in American history, revoke a constitutional right. In the draft Supreme Court opinion that will live in infamy, Samuel Alito says on page 1, the Constitution makes no mention of abortion. The Constitution also makes no mention of the right to travel. The government has never granted us the right to travel, yet we have always had it. Roe versus Wade linked the right to abortion services to the right to privacy, which we also always assumed that we have, but the Constitution doesn't mention a right to privacy. And Samuel Alito and a majority of the Supreme Court don't believe that you have a right to privacy, but they do believe that they have a right to privacy, which is why the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, for the first time in its history, has ordered an investigation of the very worst thing that has ever happened to the Supreme Court. The court's privacy has been invaded. The Chief Justice calls the violation of the court's privacy a, quote, egregious breach of trust. And that's how the Supreme Court feels when they lose their privacy. It's egregious for them. But they don't care how you feel when they take your privacy away. The private deliberations of the Supreme Court have been invaded by the leak of the Alito first draft of the revocation of a constitutional right. Samuel Alito says that a right to abortion services is not, quote, deeply rooted in this nation's history. Women on the Supreme Court are not deeply rooted in this nation's history. Nowhere does the Constitution say that women can serve on the Supreme Court. Nowhere does the Constitution say that black people can serve on the Supreme Court. The founders thought only white men should ever serve on the Supreme Court. The founders were the original proponents of affirmative action exclusively for white men. The founders deeply and fervently believed in carrying out the mass murder of as many members of the native tribes of this continent and enslaving as many black people as was necessary for white men to reign supreme in this land. That is deeply rooted in this nation's history. If you are using deeply rooted in this nation's history as the basis for what you think is right and just, then you are lost. You are morally lost. Samuel Alito reaches back to legal writings in 17th century England to show that the right to abortion services is not deeply rooted in our history. He cites Sir Edward Coke, writing in 1644 that abortion is a crime. In 1644 in England, they were still having witch trials, ending in the execution of the convicted witches. And Sir Edward Coke helped English law define witches when he rewrote English law in 1604 to make it even more cruel in witchcraft trials. He wrote, "A witch is a person who hath conference with the devil to consult with him or to do some act." So Samuel Alito is quoting approvingly the 1644 judgment on abortion of an English aristocrat who said a witch is a person who has conference with the devil. Samuel Alito is reaching back 4 centuries to use Sir Edward Coke as a moral authority on abortion, a man who believed in witches and believed they were working with the devil and believed that witches should be murdered by the state, and he helped make sure that they were murdered by the state in England. Samuel Alito needs to talk to the clerk working for him who found that reference to Sir Edward Coke and get that erased from his draft opinion. We were executing witches in this country as late as 1692. Men and women were given the death penalty in this country for being witches, mostly women, of course. Dorothy Good was 4 years old when she was accused of being a witch in Massachusetts. So when you're justifying outlawing abortion because people conducting witch trials also believed abortion should be against the law, you are morally lost. That is what the twisted reasoning of Samuel Alito has delivered to us in the first Supreme Court opinion in history, revoking a constitutional right. For most presidents, the only thing they get to do that outlasts their presidency is appoint Supreme Court justices. Clarence Thomas's service in the Supreme Court is the only enduring thing from the presidency of George H.W. Bush. A vote for George H.W. Bush for president in 1988 has turned out to be a vote to revoke a constitutional right. His son, George W. Bush, created the Department of Homeland Security, which endures, and began wars that he could not complete. But his most enduring legacy is now the delivery of Samuel Alito to the United States Supreme Court, the first Supreme Court justice to write an opinion revoking a constitutional right. Donald Trump did something that no one-term president has ever done before. He appointed 3 Supreme Court justices. The last president to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices was Ronald Reagan, and it took him 8 years to do it. Donald Trump, the president least capable in our history of evaluating candidates for the United States Supreme Court, got to appoint 3 of them, and all 3 of them are voting to revoke a constitutional right. 70% of the country is opposed to what the Supreme Court is doing. In a democracy, this could never happen, but we do not live in a democracy because of the Electoral College and the United States Senate. The only way the Alito opinion can get a majority vote in the Supreme Court now is thanks to the Electoral College installing 2 Republican presidents who came in second with the voters. Al Gore got more votes than George W. Bush, but George W. Bush got the presidency thanks to the Electoral College. Donald Trump came in second with the voters by a wide margin, but was installed in the presidency by the Electoral College. Democrats in the United States Senate represent far more people than Republicans represent, but both parties have the same number of seats in the United States Senate because of the profoundly anti-democratic formula that each state gets 2 senators. The 44 million people of California get 2 senators, and the 1.6 million people of the Dakotas get 4. That is not democracy. That can never be democracy. And so 70% of the country is living tonight under the anguish and the weight of minority rule. 70% of the country is losing a constitutional right against their will. 70% of the country has had that constitutional right for their entire lives. But for Samuel Alito, that is not deeply rooted in this nation's history. There is one president in our history who was impeached twice and never won a majority vote in a presidential election, and he got to appoint the same number of justices as Ronald Reagan, who won 49 states in his re-election campaign. There is one president in our history who provoked serious public discussions of using the 25th Amendment to remove him from office, and he got to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. The first public discussion of the 25th Amendment with Donald Trump that I'm aware of to remove him from office was on this program in the first month of the Trump presidency, and we now know that in the last month of the Trump presidency, in the last days of the Trump presidency, there were serious discussions about removing Donald Trump using the 25th Amendment, and those discussions were taking place among congressional leadership in both parties. Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the House Republicans, participated in discussions about removing Donald Trump using the 25th Amendment after the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Today, the authors of the new book titled This Will Not Pass released audio tape of Kevin McCarthy in a meeting with House Republican leadership discussing the possible impeachment of Donald Trump and the possibility of removing him from office using the 25th Amendment.
Yeah. Look, what the president did is atrocious and totally wrong. From the standpoint, we're 12 days away. I mean, the one point I'd make with Biden, if you have an impeachment and you're stuck sitting in the Senate and he needs cabinet members, you've got Secretary of Defense, you've got a lot of things that you've got to have moving. And if you think from a perspective, you put everything else away, this country is very, very divided.
You know, I think the options that have been cited by the Democrats so far are the 25th Amendment, which is not exactly an elegant solution here.
That takes too long, too. It could go back to the House, right?
Yeah, and correct. If the president were to submit a letter overruling the cabinet and the vice president, it's a 2/3 vote in the House and Senate to overrule the president. So it's kind of inartful. Obviously, impeachment has been discussed, and then I think they want him to resign, which I don't see happening either. But members are talking about it, and we'll keep you posted on what we're hearing.
The president they are talking about got to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices after coming in second with the voters and after Mitch McConnell defied the Constitution and refused to bring President Obama's last Supreme Court nominee to a vote in the Senate so that Donald Trump could choose one of the names on Mitch McConnell's list to fill the seat on the Supreme Court that the Constitution said should have been filled by President Obama. Such is the constitutional treachery of Republican minority rule in the 21st century, which is well on its way to being deeply rooted in this country's history.
It is Thursday, the 5th of May of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Oh my. Well, it is Cinco de Mayo, which is the holiday that Americans use it as an excuse to get drunk again. So be careful out there. You know, when you're driving a car, doesn't matter if it's a hybrid, electric, or gas-powered, your diminished capacity could be a danger to not only yourself, but others on the road as well. Okay, so be careful, all right? Hey, I gotta give you a little bit of inside baseball here at Netroots Radio. We had a extended internet outage late last night, and it wasn't just the internet, it was everything. It was TV, it was the telephones, cell phones. I could not get a signal to be able to announce that we've been bumped off the air because of internet outage. So I don't know what happened. I haven't heard yet what had occurred that caused all of it to drop. I suspect that somebody hit a tower somehow. I don't know. Could it have been breached by the rain that's coming through? That seems odd and ridiculous, but hey, when I moved here to take care of my mom, boy, it's been a while now. Almost 6 years. Seems like only yesterday. But we did not experience these things in civilization. I'm sorry, we just didn't. I was lucky. I lived in what was known, or what is known as a hospital zone in Berkeley, in the Elmwood there. Alta Bates was just about a block and a half away, and we were part of that hospital zone in which if the power goes out, they still get power. And the benefit is that in the surrounding neighborhood, you get some power too. So we never had those power outages, never had the level of internet outages as well. Cable was out, everything, for hours. And it was late at night. And I was already behind getting ready for today. And only because my dear mom now requires a bit more looking after. And, oh gosh. You know, mental decline is always some sort of, well, hey, it's a hypothetical, isn't it? Yeah, it's like a hypothetical. What if? And then you're in the what if because it has now turned, this is the way it is. And it's a bit sad. So, take care of your moms and love them and hug them because, look, nothing is permanent here. Nothing. Even democracy, representative or otherwise, apparently. Even settled law is unsettled. Yeah. Okay. Elon Musk. It was the liberals that went extreme. Yeah. Well, we did force the right wing to react the way they did. I mean, who can blame them? They warned us not to elect the black guy, so we did it twice. What do you expect now? We're going to obviously have our rights ripped away. We obviously don't know how to, be proper citizens in their kind of representative democracy, because in their kind of representative democracy, a lot of us would not really be a part of it, except as, chattel. Yeah, all those people out there working as slaves, they're part of our representative democracy. Property, it's supreme. Oh, thanks. Human rights? Oh, no, not for you. I'm laughing because I can't believe that we're here. They're doing it right in front of our faces, and as we're wondering, hey, are we being poisoned right now? Yes, we are being poisoned. Stop arguing with yourself about it and get out of the room. Get some freaking fresh air. Working as many different types of jobs as I have over now these many, many years gives you a bit of experience. And one was getting poisoned by H2S. It's not fun. If you can smell rotten eggs, that means you can probably live. It's when you don't smell anything, it's within a fraction of a second and you're dead. So right now, I don't know the consciousness that goes on in that fraction of a second in which, you're dead. I've often wondered about it. Is your last thoughts stretched out seemingly for a long, long, long time? But it's really just a fraction of a second. I don't know. But I was feeling pretty bad. I had gone to a wellhead when I was working for Gulf Oil. And this is actually, before I became a supervisor, I was just a production operator B, which had some managerial, it was a managerial type position, but I wasn't the supervisor at that point. And I was working with a bunch of rednecks, and of course, they all called me the college boy. Mm-hmm. And of course, in their vaunted opinions, they knew a lot more than I did. And they probably did. I was a kid. But anyway, I get to a wellhead, and I'm going to take a fluid level, which is you put what's known as a echo meter, which is it's a 12-gauge shotgun shell in this contraption that you screw on to the pipe, and it shoots that shotgun shell, creates an echo, and then that graph measures how long that echo resonates, and they can determine how far down in the formation the fluid levels are. So, unbeknownst to me, the wellhead had been shut in, and unbeknownst to me because it was not logged, and that used to happen a bit. And I often wondered if it was on purpose, and I came to the conclusion, yes, it was indeed. Yeah, they tried to get rid of me. They even loosened the lug nuts on the truck that I was driving. Company issued at that point I wasn't taking it home. I picked it up when I got to the little tank farm. Loosened the lug nuts on it, knowing that I'd have to be driving on a freeway to get to another refinery to do some tests. And one of the wheels, the right front wheel, came off on the freeway while I'm going at speed. Fortunately, I didn't press on the brake. If you see your tire, or you think that a tire is like left your car, don't put on the brake. Okay. Fortunately, I did not do that. I let it coast, kind of eased my way off to the shoulder. And this is on the 91 in Southern California, by the way. Not an easy freeway to get off to the shoulder, because sometimes there isn't one. At least it wasn't that easy back in the day. But I got over there, eased it down, and that was a little scary. But back to the story about the H2S poisoning. So unbeknownst to me, I was unaware that the wellhead had been shut in. And this particular valve on this particular wellhead was down in what is known as the cellar. And that's like a little dig out in which spills of oil can collect, and then the vacuum truck comes in and pumps it out, and they do whatever they do with it. So I got my head down in the cellar to turn this valve so that I can then get my echo meter on the pipe, and I started feeling woozy. And I started thinking to myself, wow, that's weird. I've never felt like this before, except, I don't know, I've taken a lot of, at that point, most everything was illicit, if you were going to experiment with it. And I had never felt like that, and I immediately came to the conclusion I was dying. So I was able to stumble away. I got to the truck, and then I did something actually stupid. Now I was up in the hills at this point, and so I wasn't so much of a danger to anybody else, only myself. But I thought if I could just get some fresh air, that would bring me around. I wasn't thinking H2S at that point. All I know is that I was being poisoned, I was dying, and I had to get out of there. So I was able to then actually get some fresh air, kind of roused me a little bit. And then I drove to the tank farm, the little refinery, which meant that I actually had to drive on Imperial Highway there in North Orange County for a bit. And that's where it could have been dangerous to others. So at that point, we didn't have any kinds of ways to communicate back at Central Command, let's say, because sometimes you were the only person there, especially at night. But anyway, so I made it back, And yes, indeed, I'd been poisoned or gassed by H2S and got taken to an ambulance to St. Jude, and I was on a respirator for a couple of days. And so that wasn't very nice. But what I learned from that is that those who argue with themselves in those dire situations are those that die. And here we are now with people might think that I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm not. A Nazi takeover of the United States of America. And all of the attendant tragedies that will occur when the Nazis take over. I am not kidding. All that I've heard, well, all that we've heard, is that, oh, you're being hyperbolic. Oh, they're not going to ever get rid of Roe. Oh, you're just being hyperbolic. And then, we said they're never going to stop at Roe. Come on. Are you kidding me? They're going to roll back whether women can vote. They're going to roll back whether black people might still be 3/5 of a person. Because after all, there's historical precedent for that, and there's not historical precedent for conquered peoples having equality. Really? Is that what it's about? Dominance? I know representative democracy is hard. I've been involved in businesses like the Bison Brewing Company where we had about 140 individual investors and everyone had to say yes to everything that we wanted to do. What a pain in the ass. So, yeah, democracy can be hard. But you know what? It gives everybody a voice if you give everybody a voice. Otherwise, it's not representative democracy. It's something other than that. And we're way past the Republicans, the repugs, as I call them, just settling for something other than representative democracy. They're going full Nazi. Supreme Court conferred upon themselves the enabling acts. Well, the 5-6 conservative members, of course, we know who they are. And the enabling acts, yeah, that's a Nazi construct where the Nazis took over the government. Their government, judiciary, actually granted the enabling acts as law. And the Nazis went out and had the Night of the Long Knives, purge their enemies, and those within their own organization that might be a threat to the power because they might be too popular and we don't want them. That's why it was called the Night of the Long Knives. We've already seen a few Kristallnacht. We've already had a Reichstag fire or two. Jeez. So, yeah, we're being hyperbolic. They're coming for your rights, folks. They are taking constitutional guarantees away under some sort of onerous idea that it has to have historical precedent, and yet they don't even adhere to history or precedent themselves. And I refuse to be judged by an idiot who would cite a witch killer. And then, it wasn't just hail. I mean, my God, landed gentry, the aristocracy. Oh, yeah, you got to beat your wife. They're mere chattel. Yeah. I still keep thinking about Abigail Adams asking John, what about the ladies? Well, John was much nicer, but, the rest of the founders said, hey, bitch, make me a sandwich. What about the ladies? Okay. In the anti-war movement, and I have to say the civil rights movement, too, there was a lot of misogyny there. You'd think there wouldn't be, because, we're liberals. We want due process and equality for all, but my God, there was such terrible misogyny. Kind of like in punk, too. Yeah. Not completely throughout the whole genre. But, that's like Not all white guys are misogynists. Well, if you're saying it, then maybe you need to tamp it down a little bit because you are. So, I don't know. Marital rape. I kind of remember back when I got married thinking, oh, wow, if you're hard up, you just get married, then you can always have sex. Is that how it was supposed to be? Is that what the founders originally intended? If that's the case, then that needs to change, doesn't it? So I refuse to be ruled by some pinched-faced, kinky freak like Alito. You know that guy's getting spanked. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with getting spanked. Okay? But, there's some psychological reasons to explain why people lash out the way that they do. All that Alito has to do is just accept himself for who he is. And stop taking it out on other people. Especially women. What is his problem with women? Now, I suppose I could use a little bit of intellectual laziness and say, well, just look at the guy. I already have. Just look at the guy. I don't know. There's something going on there. A little bit of self-hate. I don't know. It's creepy. And it's usually the creeps who get put in power that become a terrible danger to the rest of us. And then here we are. All right. Well, you know what? Here we are, and I better get into what we have curated for you for the rest of the show here. Yeah, so I was up late, and I apologize for rambling, but there you go. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Telecom groups ended their bid to block California's net neutrality law, and it's about time. A Los Angeles hospital has been sued for racism and the death of a black mother who died hours after childbirth. Yeah, your chance for survival in childbirth actually diminishes quite a bit. Let them die. Especially if they're black, apparently. And Stacey Abrams raised a towering $11.7 million for the last 3 months in the Georgia governor's race. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the leaders of Britain and Japan are meeting today to announce a new defense agreement against the backdrop of war in Ukraine. And while the U.S. marks 1 million dead from COVID-19, the World Health Organization estimates over 15 million worldwide have succumbed to the virus. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link is a link to our Patreon site. And do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Why? Because we need the money. Please! So check out that Patreon link. And if you could afford an espresso type coffee drink and send those funds our way once a month, it would really help. Please. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and that's how you could have a quick way to get those show notes and links. Indeed. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, and of course, the deep archive of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as well as, well, the library of Netroots Radio over all these many years can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by the anonymous staff there. Telecommunications industry groups ended their bid to block California's net neutrality law that bars broadband providers from throttling service. In a federal court filing in Sacramento, the groups and California Attorney General Rob Bonta jointly agreed to dismiss the case. The move followed a January decision by the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals allowing enforcement of the 2018 law, which bans Internet providers from slowing down or blocking access to websites and applications that don't pay for premium service. Messages seeking comment from an attorney representing the groups were not immediately returned. The law was signed by former Governor Jerry Brown after regulators during the Trump administration killed federal net neutrality rules designed to prevent AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, and other major internet providers from exploiting their dominance to favor certain services or apps over others. Brian Melly of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. The husband of a black woman who died hours after childbirth in 2016 sued Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, saying she bled to death because of a culture of racism at the renowned Los Angeles hospital. Charles Johnson IV said he discovered the disparity in care women of color receive at Cedars compared to white women during depositions in his wrongful death lawsuit that is scheduled to go to trial next week in Los Angeles Superior Court. Kara Dixon Johnson died about 12 hours after a scheduled cesarean section that was performed in 17 minutes to deliver the couple's second son, Langston. Despite signs she was bleeding internally and over the desperate pleas of her husband, Kara Johnson languished for hours without being readmitted to the operating room until it was too late, the civil rights lawsuit said. At one point, a nurse told Charles Johnson that his wife was not a priority. She died from internal bleeding. Nearly 90% of her blood was later found in her stomach. Her bladder had been lacerated, and she had not been sutured properly. Jeff Amy of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donors gave a towering $11.7 million to the campaign of Georgia Democrat Stacey Abrams in the 3 months that ended April 30th. Abrams, who is unopposed in the May 24th primary election for her party's nomination, said she had more than $8 million in cash on hand. Abrams had $7.2 million in cash at the end of January, meaning she spent almost all of the huge sum she raised during that period. The heavy spending means Abrams has less cash on hand than the $10.7 million that Kemp has. He raised $2.7 million during that period, hampered by a state law that prohibits sitting office holders from accepting contributions while state lawmakers were meeting. Kemp raised his money in the 26 days following the April 4th end of the season. Kemp's pile shrank some as he also spent seeking to defeat his chief rival for the Republican nomination, former U.S. Senator David Perdue. That means Kemp leads in cash on hand shrank somewhat. Perdue has not yet disclosed his fundraising and spending for the period. The challenger has struggled to tap the same network of big donors that sustained his 2 Senate runs, despite his endorsement by Trump. After having less than $1 million on cash on hand at the end of January, Perdue hinted he would crack his own $50 million fortune to try to keep up with Kemp's spending. Abrams temporarily paused her own fundraising to urge donors to instead give to 5 groups that support abortion rights over the leak of a draft U.S. Supreme Court opinion that could overturn Roe v. Wade. Her campaign resumed its own fundraising late Wednesday yesterday while urging its donors to continue giving to the groups. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Shayla Farzan. Climate change is affecting animals in a lot of different ways, but scientists have noticed a common trend across a variety of species. They're getting smaller, as in physically smaller in size. But why? And what could this mean? Scientists have observed this phenomenon in very different animal species, from wild sheep to wood rats. But it's especially well documented in North American songbirds. In 2019, researchers at the University of Michigan published a data set of more than 70,000 birds that died after hitting windows in Chicago. The data showed that the body sizes for dozens of species had actually shrunk over the past 40 years. But when Justin Baldwin, a graduate student at Washington University in St. Louis, took a closer look at the data, something stood out.
There clearly seem to be some species that were shrinking a lot and other species that were shrinking much less.
The question was, why were some bird species shrinking faster than others? Baldwin and his colleagues had a feeling that bird behavior might be playing a role. In birds, species with bigger brains tend to be smarter and can change their behavior based on their environment. That means they might be able to buffer themselves from increasing temperatures, says Carlos Botero, an assistant professor of biology at Washington University and the study's co-author.
By adjusting their behavior, by changing the places that they look for food, the times of the day in which they do that, the things that they eat, and the ways in which they access those food sources, all those are ways in which they could experience a little bit less of a negative selection from all this variety of changes that we're seeing through climate change.
A bigger-brained bird, for example, might adjust its behavior and stay in the shadows when it's hot. So the team decided to reanalyze that massive original data set, but this time factor in brain size. They found birds with larger brains in relation to their body size are shrinking at slower rates than birds with smaller brains. And that was true even after controlling for other factors that could affect how quickly these birds are evolving, like generation time and mutation rate. But Botero says, just because these larger-brained bird species can temporarily buffer themselves from warmer temperatures, it doesn't mean they're completely protected from climate change.
It is important to realize that what we see here is not an indication that big-brained birds are fine and that they are not having any problems, or that they are just capable to take whatever kind of change is coming from this suite of different environmental phenomena that is happening right now.
Still, the team says there's a lot left to learn when it comes to the ways in which behavior could affect how bird species respond to climate change. For one thing, in this study, there was only about a twofold difference in relative brain size between the species with the largest brain, the song sparrow, and the one with the smallest, the Swainson's thrush. That means the responses could be even stronger in birds with larger brains, like crows.
We're sampling only a small amount of the potential variation in relative brain size here in our study. And so that does suggest that even potentially small differences in relative brain size might actually have a large effect on ecological responses to climate change.
For now, Baldwin says, one of the key takeaways is that smaller brain bird species could be especially vulnerable as the climate continues to change. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Shayla Farzan.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. We're joined today by Dr. Scott Casper, President of the American Antiquarian Society. Dr. Casper, what questions did the framers address in deciding how the president should be selected?
There were three ideas floated. The first, which Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania floats, is the idea of having the president elected by the people. Today, this may seem obvious to us. In 1787, it was far more complicated than we might think. One reason is, as some delegates pointed out, how will the people at large know who the national characters, the leading national figures are? So in some cases, some delegates thought the people were not the proper people to make this selection. But the bigger challenge with having the president elected by the people would be how would it work? There were not uniform rules across the states about who had the right to vote. So if, for example, in the northern states, a larger percentage of adult men had the right to vote than did in the southern states, would that mean that every presidential election would be controlled by the northern states because more people had the right to vote? So direct election by the people, as appealing as it might sound, was in fact not what the delegates considered primarily.
Check out more interviews with Dr. Scott Casper in Unit 2 of the We the People Open Course, a free online course on the U.S. Constitution at learn.civiced.org. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1852. It was the last day of a 3-day convention held in Cincinnati, Ohio. Printers who worked for newspapers and other publications from 14 cities had converged to decide if they wanted to form a union. The printers had first met on the question of starting a union 2 years before in New York City. Now they were ready, and with a vote, the National Typographical Union was born. The very first action of the new union was to denounce Sunday workdays. Only one person cast his vote against the motion. The printers would play a leadership role in the U.S. labor movement. Printers were located in major cities across the U.S. Even more importantly, the union's members often worked for newspapers and had a skill set that could help get the word out about union news and actions. 17 years later, the organization changed its name to the International Typographical Union in recognition of new Canadian locals that joined. That same year, the union decided to let women into its ranks. This made it one of the earliest unions to do so. In 1870, Augusta Lewis was elected as corresponding secretary. She became the first female officer of a nationwide union. The ITU was known to be a very democratic union with strong locals. As printing technology changed, the union faced many challenges. Computers dramatically transformed the work of printing. These technology changes reduced the numbers and strength of the union. In 1986, the ITU merged with the Communication Workers of America. One of the ITU's most famous members was author Mark Twain, who joined the Typographical Union as a young man and proudly held his union card for the rest of his life. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 59 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 60. Considerably cooler than yesterday because we were a bit over 80 degrees yesterday and it was pretty warm through the night. So hey, we were able to keep the windows open and get some fresh air. Fortunately, people were not burning trash, fortunately. But as forecast yesterday, yes indeed, we do have copious amounts of water falling from the sky, expecting about a half an inch for today, with winds out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And considerable cloudiness tonight with rain showers bringing about a quarter inch of rain. And we should have lows tonight in the low 50s and then highs tomorrow in the low 60s, with showers early becoming a steady rain later in the day. Winds out of the southwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour, bringing with it a quarter inch of rain. And then, oh my God, I think this is altitude, because the weather station that the Weather Underground draws from is several hundred feet higher in elevation than where the mothership is here in Rogue River proper. So we are forecast to have a snowy mix through Mother's Day weekend. What the hell? You know, this is wrecking havoc on the garden. All right, we're trying to grow vegetables here. Stop it. All right. Well, confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County have been updated. We now stand at 432,045 confirmed cases. And our deceased, according to the update, has not increased. We continue to stand at 531. Looks like pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 24 parts per million, though that daytime UV index is in the high range at level 6. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.86 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles. Relative humidity is at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 68 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 65 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 66 and fair. Kyiv is 60 degrees and sunny. Kabul is 60 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 75 and fair. Tokyo is 65 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 62 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 66 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. Okay, and that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The militaries of Britain and Japan will work more closely together under a defense deal that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced during talks with his Japanese counterpart today. Johnson hosted Premier Fumio Kishida at the British leader's 10 Downing Street residence. He noted the strong stance Japan has taken against the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and he drew a parallel with the security situation in Asia. There is direct read across from the actions of autocratic coercive powers in Europe to what may happen in East Asia, Johnson said. That's why we want to work more closely together. Johnson's office said the agreement will allow the two countries' forces to deploy together for training, joint exercises, and disaster relief. Kishida's first official visit to the UK as Prime Minister was marked with an overflight of London by 3 Royal Air Force planes. The two group of 7 leaders were expected to discuss Russia's invasion of Ukraine and how to exert pressure on Putin. Japan has condemned Russia's invasion and joined Western nations in opposing sanctions against Moscow. Japan also has supplied Ukraine with helmets and other non-lethal military aid.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Maria Chang of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. The World Health Organization estimates that nearly 15 million people were killed either by coronavirus or by its impact on overwhelmed health systems in the past 2 years, more than double the official death toll of 6 million. Most of the fatalities were in Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Americas. In the report that was issued today, the UN agency's chief described the figure as sobering, saying it should prompt countries to invest more in their capacities to quell future health emergencies. How about the one right now? Scientists tasked by WHO with calculating the actual number of COVID-19 deaths between January of 2020 and the end of last year estimated there were between 13.3 million and 16.6 million deaths that were either caused directly by the coronavirus or were somehow attributed to the pandemic's impact on health systems, like people with cancer unable to seek treatment when hospitals were full of COVID patients. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for, you got it, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.